So this is going to be our review of Death's Door, a fun little indie game that we just finished up. As a quick reminder, how we do it: it's broken down story, then gameplay, and then overall on a simple 1 to 10 scale. So let's start out with the story. This is not a story-heavy game, but there is a story, and I think it's a pretty good one. I think it does a pretty good job of telling that story entirely through the game, and then there is some extra tidbits you can find as you find the shiny objects and you read about them. Some of which even unlock additional parts of the game if you pay attention to things that they say, and they give you hints toward things, which I thought was really well done. Especially for this type of game, like it's not an RPG, but it has a good amount of story and it tells a good story, and it makes you care about the characters that you interact with. For the most part, I really enjoyed it. So I have very little complaints about the story. It had a good beginning, middle, and end, I would say. It does have a secret ending, or a true ending, as it's sometimes called. So if you do decide to play the game and you get down to the end and you want to know more about the backstory, there is an extra true ending that you can achieve, which was also fairly interesting. Overall, I would say the story was solid. I don't think there's really a whole lot to touch on here or kind of go into. It just kind of worked. It just kind of achieved what it was there to achieve. Um, it didn't like it doesn't like blow your mind or anything. It's not like this crazy good story, but like it did have a nice feeling to it. Um, and it reminded me of some other things that I enjoyed reading from time to time. It was quirky and a bit of an interesting take on the concept of death, and reapers and all that kind of stuff like that. So I enjoyed it. I would give the story. What are we feeling here? I'm feeling like an 8. I'm feeling like an 8 on the story. Like, it was very solid. Nothing really negative to say. Um, it just doesn't like blow your mind or anything. Like, it's not like a 10, but it's above average. It's still really solid. I feel like it's about an 8, maybe like an 8.5. Um, so yeah, really just nothing negative to say about that. Getting into the gameplay section of it, this was an interesting one as well. Now, I played this mostly on controller, which for me is a bit different because I'm not a console gamer. I'm generally pretty uncomfortable playing on controller on most games, and that's part of the reason why I opted to play it on controller, because I'm trying to get more accustomed to playing games on controller, and rounding out that sort of part of my skill set. Um, so I would say the controls and everything for controller were very good. My own awkwardness a little bit aside, everything works really well as far as the controls interacting with the gameplay. Especially as you upgrade your skills, because you can upgrade either your strength, your speed, your dodge, or your magic. And I opted to go for mostly strength and dodge early, and then I added in a little bit of dexterity. And once you kind of sort of hit that sweet spot of rounding out those where you can get your couple of attacks in and dodge away, I found the gameplay to be very good. Um, it's There is no difficulty selector in the game. So it's sort of like a Dark Soulsy kind of game in that sense, that there's only one difficulty and the game is completely balanced around that. I found the difficulty curve to be very fair. Um, no individual fight was like too stupid or anything like that. The minions were the regular mobs, the regular little minions. They were, also pretty fair. They threw in a good smattering of sort of like what I would call mini boss type creatures that would throw some wrenches in your way, and they had a good variety of those. Um, the minion variety in general was pretty decent. I mean, it wasn't anything like crazy, but it was good enough that it never felt like you were just tediously whacking away on the exact same stuff and getting bored of it. And that's a compliment as well to the core gameplay, like the core combat. Like, it was very smooth, everything worked well. I didn't encounter really any bugs, any crashes, any major glitches of any kind. The game ran well. FPS was always solid, 60 plus. I cap it at 60 for the VTuber, so I had 60 pretty much the whole time, as far as I was aware. No hitches or anything of that nature. Just really technically solid all the way around. The power variety was, it was pretty good. Each one had its place and its usage. Getting all the upgrades made them, also kind of get a little bit more usage. Depending on how you decide to play the game, you may use the powers more or less. I was kind of a little bit of a middle ground. I didn't use like a ton of magic, but I used like enough of it. And it was useful at the times I used it. But because I invested so much into strength and stuff early, my melee weapon hit really hard. I don't know what it would be like to do a magic build. I imagine it'd be pretty strong, considering how strong I felt like my sword got. So I could see the game being completely viable, being played full magic with maybe a little bit of dexterity, just so you could swing faster and regain. Because the way you regain your magic is by hitting things. So you could go like dexterity and magic, I think, and be totally viable. Because the magic is really good. Like, the magical skills they give you are very good. They do good damage, even without me having invested in them. So I can imagine you invested in them, they're going to be very strong. So I feel like you've got two different really kind of ways of that you could play the game, primarily as either like melee or magic. I kind of went a middle round and did both, which I think you'd do either way, but like, you could lean heavily one way or the other, and I think both are pretty viable, I would say, would be my guess. I think magic might be like a little bit harder overall, just because like when you're fighting all the little minions and stuff, it might be a little more tedious, because your melee's not going to do much damage. But I think it's totally viable. I think you'd maybe even have an easier time with some of the bosses. I'm not sure. I'd have to really like play it, but I found most of the, on that note, most of the bosses as well to be pretty well designed and interesting. Each area had its own flavor, its own design. The graphics and stuff were gorgeous throughout the game. I thought it had a very unique and interesting style. The music was also a high point. The music soundtrack to the game was like, it fit with the game beautifully. It was there, it was unintrusive, but it set the mood and the atmosphere of every place that you were exploring. And it just kind of melded into the background, and it just flowed with everything very, very well. And people in my chat also made several mentions to enjoying the music. People that were probably maybe listening to it in the background as they were doing other things and stuff like that. Like, there was a lot of praise thrown around for the music and the visuals. So gameplay wise, it's hard to find any major flaws with it. I think everything flowed and worked really, really, really well. Even being a controller nub that I am, I was able to use the controller with really no major like issues at all. Like, everything just worked. So I feel like on the gameplay, I don't know. It's like there's like no major flaw. It's I can't really dock it on anything in particular. I think realistically, you got to give the gameplay like a 10. I think I have to give it a 10. I don't often give out 10s for anything, because I usually try to, reserve that for something exceptional. But like, there's really no flaws to this. There's no gameplay thing that I can point out that I was like, I hated this, or this bothered me, or this just didn't quite work right, or this didn't quite flow right, or anything like that. Even the weapon variety was pretty good. I opted mostly to use the base sword because it was just a nice middle ground of speed and damage, which is generally the way I like to play games. But if you like to have the bigger, slower per hit damage, the two-hander was good. If you wanted to be faster and more dex build, the two blades I think also probably would be really good. They may even do like a crap ton of damage if you're full dex. I'm not really sure, but you know, they were viable. Everything felt viable. If anything, oh, and there was also the hammer, which was kind of cool because it did like sort of a little bit of a lightning AoE as well. I mean, you could sort of say like I wish there was more weapons, but for the length of the game, I felt like there was a good amount of weapons. You know, sure you could always want more just because, but you didn't need them. Honestly, I felt like there was a good variety there. I felt like they hit on everything. So I really can't think of any major thing to dock it on. I think if I had any complaint at all about the game, it might be I wish it had a map, because some of the areas are quite expansive, and there's a lot of different routes that you can run through them and a lot of secrets to find. I guess I kind of wish it had a map. That would have been nice to have, but I also kind of get the feeling that that was sort of a development decision of them deciding not to give you a map. Not that they just overlooked it. I feel like they probably thought about that and decided ultimately, no, we don't want to have a map. You know, we want you to have to explore and go through these areas and stuff like that. You know, and find everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a conscious choice. So that kind of brings down to the final category, which is the overall score, which I feel like is a 9. You know, between gameplay being really high and storyline being, you know, really high and everything like that. I feel like it's a 9 out of 10 kind of game. You know, there's really no major flaws. Everything is very, very solid. So I have nothing really super negative to say about it. The only reason it doesn't it's only a 9 instead of a 10 is just because the story was just, it was good. It just wasn't like transformative, you know, like it wasn't worth like a 10, but it was very, very solid. Very, very solid. So overall, this game, I think, is sitting at a 9 out of 10 on Steam, and I feel like that is very accurate. I think I agree with that quite a bit. It might even be more like a 9.5. Like it's sort of like on the verge of being a 10. It's solid game. Uh, and I had no major flaws or complaints with it. And then it just endures. You know, I feel like this is the kind of game you'll look back on and go, yeah, this was just a solid gameplay experience. I have very little regrets. So nothing but really positive praise for Death's Door, and nothing really negative to say about it. No crashes, no bugs, no gameplay issues. The story was, you know, pretty solid. Everything's good here. This is just a good game. Go out and play it if you haven't, or watch somebody play it if you prefer. If you're not into sort of the somewhat tough difficulty curve that it can have at sometimes. So everything's solid. That's pretty much it. That's a wrap. That's Death's Door. Go out and play it.